record it. So if you need, you will have the possibility to have a look at it again. So digitization, I was saying, is the shift from analogic to digital. And during this 30 years, we had a lot of examples of digitization. So there are some objects of daily life that you don't find anymore, or you won't find anymore in the next future. So everything which is on paper, for example, books, notebooks, mails, etc., are not strictly necessary, because the information that it is codified into that can be codified into digital. So you use other instruments, but you have the clocks, you have the analogic records, even banknotes or cameras, etc. So these are examples of digitization, which is a technical process. But when we go so this the process is to transformation of analogic data, which is continuous, into numbers, and numbers codify some parts of the reality. They tend to let's say reproduce reality as it is, because they turn it into numbers, and these numbers have the possibility to be submitted to given operations. But so what is the example? In agriculture, for example, you have systems of milking. And if you think to a traditional milking systems, you have the farmer, you have the cow, you have some instruments to pump the milk, or even, for example, you cannot just apply by hand. And then you have a tank to store this milk. But when you start to digitalize, you have the possibility, for example, to turn analogic data, for example, the decision to start and stop of the cluster that you apply to the cow, into a digital impulse. So you don't have to switch something, but you will have a control system. And for example, you will have data on the milking flow. So the control system can know when it's time to stop, because the flow is not arriving anymore. So this is the process of progressive digitization. And for example, if you consider the application or removal of the cluster to the cow, normally this is, in most of the cases, is a hand task, but in some cases it is digitalized. So when you have the possibility to replace the human hand and human arm with automatic arm, you can command it with a control system based on the data of the milking flow, and also a lot of other information. So the human is still, as we can see, in the loop, but in many of these cases the process is automatic. So what are the implications of a digitization? The fact is that digitized information is storable, first of all, so you can conserve the data about digital data. They are accessible, So everyone who have the possibility can have access to this data. It is replicable, so you can make as many copies as you want, and is transmittable, so you can transfer this data often at long distances. And these are the features that make digital systems so disruptive for a lot of human activities, because as you have seen, there are some items that they don't exist anymore. For example, if you consider all the sectors of photography, we have companies, very big companies, giant companies, who simply have collapsed because they had no market. They couldn't, let's say, renew their business model in time with the digital revolution. So, for example, films that are needed for analogic photos, or the red camera in order to develop the pictures, or the albums that are based on paper and you can store on the libraries, or the people who repair the cameras, all of them are obsolete tasks or tools. So you can imagine how much disruption this may create in a system. And we have several waves of disruption in the commerce, in the taxi system, in everyday life. So when we consider the difference between digitization and digitalization, when we consider digitalization, we consider the social aspect and the socio-economic aspect. And we consider digitalization as the reorganization of human activities in relation to digitization. So when we consider digitalization, we are talking about socio-economic aspects rather than technological aspects. But of course, these two aspects are very linked together. One aspect that is allowed and is fostered by digitization is the internet. The internet applies the network principle and connects together different information entities. And this makes possible to make a lot of operations. As you know, the internet now is a complex reality. It's a worldwide reality, and it is composed by three tiers. The first one is based on large communication companies. You mentioned, for example, AT&T, so this has implications for the monopolies or other aspects. But then we have the internet service providers that buy internet transit, so they let's say buy access to the internet and resell it to users. And then you have this multi-homed ESP. Now, don't remember the acronym, but anyway, it's companies that have a kind of a retailing function in the system. So there are several levels of actors that manage the internet, and this is important to know because the way the internet is governed may have implications on the livelihood of people. So with the internet, we have seen an exponential increase in the number of connected devices. So in 1992, we had 1 million of devices. Now we have something like 50 billions. So there is an exponential growth. And now that these devices are being connected to each other, it is foreseen that this device will, the growth of this device will increase a lot. And with the increase of devices that can capture data, they can produce data, they can transmit data, there is an exponential increase of accumulated data. Now we are to 8,000 exabytes. That means let's say billions gigabytes. So it's enormous quantity of data, data that can reproduce to a certain extent and digitalize our realities. So our realities are, let's say, digitized, stored, communicate, and they are somewhere in the cloud. Just to let you know why we are trying to consider this evolution is that it is to make you clear that the internet, and as we know now, is a very recent history. So Google, which is now the giant, the biggest monopoly in the world, it didn't exist before 2000 time. So in 20 years, Google and other Facebook and other giants have changed everything. In the 60s, we had the first computers. In the 70s, some computers start to be connected to each other. Only in the 80s, we had the possibility to have the email, and the email was the only service we had with the internet. So in the 80s, we knew the internet only through the possibility to send messages electronically. And this meant, for example, for me, I entered into the university in 1986. I experienced this shift from written letters to the email. It was, I can assure you, it was a revolution. Only in 1990s, we had the first browsers, web browsers. So with the internet, you could get information, you could search for information, you could get images. But only in the 2000s, the internet that we know started to appear. And actually, this is the evolution of the internet. So the internet 1.0 is what we call only read web. So there are information stored somewhere, you can have access to it. And this was it. So this was the only thing that the internet could do at that time, which was not bad because it was the access to a global, let's say, set of information resources. Then in the Internet 2.0, in 2000, with Google, Google and Facebook, we have the starting of the reading and writing web. So you go to a website you don't not only download or just browse information, but you can give information to the provider or to transmit information. So users contribute to data accumulation. So whereas for the Internet 1.0, you could just get information, with the Internet 2.0, you contribute to accumulate data. Anytime you go on the website, you provide data to data providers. And then you have Internet 3.0, in which the web is read, write, execute. So you can execute software on the web. So first of all, Internet has become a mega database. There is the start of the work of the artificial intelligence. So that means that our algorithms that are fed by information and learn automatically. And also we have the semantic web, a web that can classify the information through some specific algorithm. And at the same time, this web can be used to share and to reuse data. So this is the Internet 3.0 that mainly is what are we experiencing now. But then in the 2020, now we progressively learn that there is an Internet 4.0. And this Internet 4.0 has the capacity to connect things together. And this means that it is possible to create augmented reality or improved interfaces or even digital twins. I will show in a minute what they are, just to understand the potentialities of these new tools. But first, let's consider the issue of data, because when we consider the Internet, when we consider digitalization, in the end, we are talking about data. This data are created by sensing, so you need tools that transform the analogic reality into numeric reality. So you need cameras, you need temperature sensors, you need humidity sensors, etc. And these sensors have the capacity to transform the information, analogic information, into numbers. Then you have the connection. So you need to transfer this data. You have to store this data. And this is the, let's say, the task of connecting. Then you have to analyze this data. And this is the role of the software. So you have algorithms that are written into specific codes. They get the data and they transform this data into other data that are relevant for information. And after the analysis and after the computation, you go to applications and services. So with this data, for example, you understand that the plant has a need for water. This is based on sensing that gets data about water in the field. They transmit this data to another unit. The analysis says, okay, under this threshold, we need to intervene. The application is something that, for example, let a device spray water into the field. So in this case, we have a circular connection about all these things, and the data tasks are continuously enhanced and improved. So what does a sensor see for the moment? As you can see, you can just have pictures, very clear pictures from let's say above, but at the same time you can use multispectral data to analyze the differences that the images make, or the thermal activities. So you can detect the temperature that is related to specific objects you observe. So sensors are getting more and more advanced, more accurate, and they can be used to predict a lot of phenomena in reality. And another issue related to data is that data create value, because they can be used for descriptive analytics, so understanding what has happened, but they can be used together with the software with predictive analytics, so they can tell you what will happen based on statistical models or specific algorithms that are fed by increasing bundles, increasing quantities of data. But also you can have prescriptive analytics. As I said before, if you have the possibility to see that a specific plant is in need for water, you can have an analytics that in the end says to an actuator, so an irrigator, something like that, to spray water. And in this case, the data can explore action. So big data are possible because there is digitization, but also connection, so possibility to transmit this data, and also because data can be pooled together, as data are now not just in the computers of specific people, but they are in the cloud. They are pooled together and they create a huge masses of data that can, let's say, feed the machines learning. And for example, one of the possible predictions of behavior is in profiling. So when I buy a book on the Amazon, the book is suggesting, the Amazon is suggesting me other books that are similar to the one I have purchased, because other people have already purchased the same books. So it is a suggestion, and this is based on the intelligence they make of my profile or my choices and my, let's say, attitudes and needs. So the profiling is to identify patterns between variables that can help predicting characteristics of individuals. Giampiero, let me know when I have to stop for.
Yeah, you can stop now for the live polling. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I've prepared for you students a very short survey just to know how often do you e-purchase on the internet, just about Amazon and profiling. So you are invited to answer this short question that you find in the chat. So I see that some of you already answered. Okay, thank you. Gianluca, you are also invited to answer if you like.
Okay, thanks. I don't know if okay, yes.
In the chat, yeah. Okay, let's wait maybe for others, but apparently you purchase monthly according to your question. And just in the meanwhile you finish, you complete, I prepared just a little another little survey. Don't worry, something really easy, but I have to do it live and I cannot prepare it on Microsoft Teams. So just give me some seconds to copy paste the question and the answers.
In the meanwhile, I can proceed or I wait?
As you wish, Gianluca. Maybe we can take just 1 minute to
finish. No problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
And also, if there are questions in the meanwhile, yes, or comments.
Questions not yet, but comments about it's amazing this presentation, because actually we can see how it was developing technologies until nowadays, but question not yet. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Actually, yes, I think that it's useful because you know, for people like me who have experienced the whole let's say digital revolution, it's now amazing to see how far we are. But for people who have born let's say in the end of the last century, maybe they have never experienced differences like this. So this is really history, I think, but this helps us to understand what is a digital revolution and what is disruption. Okay, you can answer the second poll.
Yeah, exactly, Gianluca. I've prepared just another poll about the impact of the digital revolution in your life. So what is the main revolution, the main domain that you are impressed by the rate of innovative elements that is that digitalization has favored? Okay. In the meanwhile, we can clearly state that you purchase monthly. That is the 75% of the answer of you. So you buy on the internet. Okay, we have already 13, 14, 15, and okay. So according to your answers, social networks are the main revolution that internet and digitalization has brought is in social networks and on the e-commerce. And only one of you answered digital photography and video. So thank you, Gianluca, for the interruption.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
We can go a little bit ahead. So yes, I will make some examples, but you already know them, so I just pass very easily. As you know, augmented reality is the capacity to add information to, let's say, information you get by senses. So if you have a look at the landscape, in this case there is let's say a city landscape, with the device, you can identify information related to the images you see. And so you can see that there are office buildings, shopping centers, apartment buildings, condominiums, etc. So the reality you see is augmented by certain information about the things you see. With virtual reality, on the contrary, you will have a totally, let's say, new reality, a totally digital reality. In this case, you are totally detached from reality, and you can live different realities. As you may know, recently there has been experiments to put in contact one mother with her, let's say, died child. So they created the digital reality of this died child interacting with her. And as you can imagine, it raises a lot of questions, ethical questions, but also general types of questions. We have interfaces. The tricky things, the interfaces, you know, they are instruments that put people, connect people with the digital reality. It means that in order to, for example, give a command to a device, you need to have, for example, a keyboard. What is interesting here is that the interface can be digital as well. So you have numbers projected on your hand, and you can reproduce a keyboard on your hand. So actually your fingers have a sensor of movement, and they can detect what kind of operations you are going to go. And so this issue of interfaces between the physical world, the human world, the informational world are really something that changes the experience of daily life. And the latest development of digitalization is what we call digital twins. What are digital twins? They are models, numeric models of real objects. For example, in this case, we have two cows. The idea is to reproduce digitally their behavior. Especially the functions that are most important for agriculture, for example, milking, health, etc. But the digital twins are relevant because they are fed with the real-time information about the behavior of the real cow, for example. So you can predict in advance with simulation what may happen to this cow. For example, if there is a little bit of temperature, you can predict if this temperature evolves into a fever, into a disease, etc., or if given the external condition, the environmental condition, it will fix itself. So these digital twins are used, for example, a lot already in the industrial sector because you can predict when the machines will need maintenance. And so you can anticipate maintenance, trying to replace the pieces that are obsolete, or even replace the whole machine. But in this case, you can save a lot of money because you reduce the costs that maintenance will have. So what is the economic impact of digitalization. In this case, I think that you have already seen that digitalization is disruptive, and this has huge impact on the economy. Let's start from the cost of computing. In 1940, we had huge costs of doing a simple operation, simple digital operation. And the same operations are now extremely cheap. And this means that if you increase the potential of computation, of course, you can do a lot of operation, and in a cheap way and in an easy way. And this is the basis for the economy, the digital economy. So in general, we consider the impact of digitalization in terms of phases. We have the third industrial revolution, which is based on automation, so robots, communication, possibility to communicate at distance, sharing economy, and for example, Uber or even Google instruments can help to create the sharing economy, or working at a distance, e-commerce, and disintermediation, which means that instead of passing through a middleman, you can directly go towards the retailers, even if you have small quantities, because this is something that is done by the software that organizes diversity. But all this is already something in place, and you can recognize everything like this. What is in the fourth industrial revolution? We have the artificial intelligence plus automation. So robots have been created quite a long time ago, but what is now new is that robots can make decisions automatically. So this means that they can do operations that in the past only humans could do. And they don't just repeat the same operation, but they can make a decision in relation to the context to which they apply. But biotechnologies are a part of the fourth industrial revolution, because biotechnology are, in the end, manipulation of genetic information. So if this genetic information is turned into numbers, in the end, you can consider biotechnologies as a branch of information technology, because you can have libraries of genes, you can pick different types of gene, recombine them on the computer, but then given the, let's say, the command to turn this model of gene into real proteins and real organic matter. So it is mainly done at the digital level, but in the end it has important implications in the physical world. You can have a 3D printing. You have seen by sure, and also in the food sector, there is an increasing use of 3D printing that may change totally the way we understand industry of food, because you don't need any concentration of raw material and huge plans of transformation, but you can distribute the production of food on the territory. And the other part of this fourth industrial revolution is what we call the Internet of Things. So things communicating to each other and behaving and making decisions that are excluding in the last instance the humans. So there are systems that are totally automated. Another aspect of the economic impact is the value of networks. Networks is something that is known since a long time, but now you really understand what is the value. And in terms of the value, you have to see that whereas scale economies are normally linear progression, so they are proportional to the number to the size of the production. In the case of the networks, any additional node increases exponentially the value of the network. I don't know what is happening. I did not do anything. Let me share again the screen. Sorry. Okay, let's go. Okay, yes.
Okay.
Doesn't work?
Yeah, now it works.
Okay, now it works again. Okay, so as the network is a source of resources, because in the network you can find information, you can find friends, you can find relationships, business relationships, etc. You are encouraged to enter into a network, and the bigger are these networks, the bigger the value of the network. And for this reason, you have Google, Facebook, etc. as monopolies, because as they grow exponentially, it is very difficult for the others to catch them up, because when a big network is already established, it's difficult to create new big networks. But it happens if they give, let's say, another type of advantages to users. Another aspect of the economic impact of digitalization is that there is a collapse of the cost of digital goods, whereas the physical goods increase as long as you increase the number of units. So if you buy a book, for example, on Amazon, what is the marginal cost of the additional book you buy? It's nothing. It is a digital copy, and it's the cost is, let's say, some energy to move these bytes from the Amazon to your computer. So for the companies who sell digital goods, the more you sell, the lesser is the cost of units of production. So there is no competition between the physical goods companies and the digital good companies. And for this reason, for example, in the case of the camera sector, this sector has disappeared completely. But for example, if you consider the sector of videotapes, also this is a company who has multinational, who has collapsed, because with the digitalization, everybody could download the film from their screen, and so there was no need of physical support to and there was not the need for the reader, etc. So a lot of chains of tools were disappearing. But this is also implying a business model. You ask why a lot of services are provided for free. For example, in order to go to Facebook, you don't have to pay. In order to search for Google, you don't have to pay. But there are a lot of services like this. And this is the question about what is the business model, why Google gives this for free, why Facebook gives this for free. Of course, there is a reward, but actually they didn't understand what the business was before, let's say, 10 years. So for 10 years, both Facebook and Google didn't know how to turn this advantage into economic advantage, and actually they have found now a way to gain money with ad supported. So they sell advertisement, and as there are a lot of people, you know the importance of the value of the network. As there are a lot of people are watching a specific advertisement, so they sell this advertisement. This is a business model. But this, another business model linked to this, to a certain extent, is the hidden revenue generation. So actually, as you know, Google and Facebook sell the information about their customers to other companies to help them to profiling these companies. And this means that you can generate value by selling information. But there are other business models. For example, Netflix, as you know, is subscription based. So you pay a fee relatively low per month and you get as many films as you want. Or, for example, there is the on-demand business model like Uber. So when you need Uber, you pay. Or, for example, there is Amazon, that is a marketplace. So you pay in relation to what do you buy. Or there is the freemium model that, for example, Spotify, you have a free set of services, but if you want a better services, you pay. So there are several ways to make money out of the digital economy, and all the companies are trying to identify what are the best and what are the most creative issues and most creative business model related to that. So when you consider digitalization in manufacturing, you have to look at the tasks that are replaced. And in this case, it is important to see what is the difference between digitization and digitalization. Because when you consider a task, your question or the question of the technologist is to what extent this task can be digitized. And there are, as you can see here, a situation where all tasks can be replaced, some tasks can be replaced, or in some cases, no tasks can be replaced so far. Because they are more difficult, they need a specific skills that machines don't have yet. But as you can see here, this is the first step, because then you can see the effects on employment. And so you can see job loss or new tasks for example, that can be higher value tasks or same value tasks. So you can replace let's say the labor power with different tasks, but the same tower, or some people can be forced to do lower value tasks because their skills are obsolete. So in the end, they can do only very basic tasks. And this is a relevant scheme, I think, to analyze what is the social impact of digitalization on society as a whole, especially in the labor world. So in the end, and this we are going to a little bit more philosophical aspect, we can see that digitalization transforms our reality. And our reality is not the reality we were used to know, let's say 20 years ago. We have the external world, which is nature, more or less. Then within nature, you have the human life worlds made of physical people, physical relations, etc. But then you have what Floridi calls the infosphere. And what is the infosphere? The infosphere is a reality based on information. And as we have seen so far, information can replace a lot of tasks that were previously in the human life worlds or in the external worlds. For example, as you said, social networks have disrupted your lifestyles. Actually, social networks replace to a certain extent the human relations in person. And we know with COVID how different this is, but at the same time you can see the potential and also the limits of it. But what is relevant here, that the infosphere is not a separate realm from the human life worlds, because our life, as we are connected anyway, is partly in the real life and partly online. And actually Floridi names this situation as on life, which means that you are always partially in the infosphere and partially in the, let's say, natural physical sphere. Let me know if something is unclear. So just to make example, how much time do we live in or with the infosphere? Personally, I wake up with the digital alarm clock, so my infosphere enters into my life already from the digital alarm clock. Then I read the online news. Then I go to my computer, check my email, have online conference, exchange chat with colleagues, write a paper with the colleagues in a share file. But then I can order, actually I don't do it, but somebody can do it, order food on online platform, then in the evening watch a movie on Netflix, and then maybe read a book on the iPad. So this is real life, but it's based on the infosphere. So this is really changing the way we interpret our world, because it's mainly based on digital objects. What are the characteristics of the infosphere? They can disconnect, localization, and presence. So we are, I don't know where you are, but so I don't know what is your localization, but we are present together in this event, in this workshop. So we can disconnect localization with present. But also we can control remotely. So I can decide to look at my second house and to start the heating or the cooling system. So in the weekend I can go and have a comfortable atmosphere. Or I can follow people at a distance. So the issue of surveillance is something that you can do staying in your office, but having the possibility to watch what the others do. And these are all characteristics, some of the characteristics of the infosphere, and are related to this disconnection between localization and presence. At the same time, you experience the disconnection between property and use. So when I download a book on Amazon, I don't buy the property. I just buy its use, and in fact I cannot copy it and I cannot pass it to others, and this raises issues of justice in some cases. But this is possible because as a copy of an object can be done so easily, you can give out the use of this object, but without giving out the property of it. And another aspect is the disconnection between reality and materiality. What is reality now? You have seen my, let's say, my life world. It's mainly based on the digital sphere. I stay at home and I do a lot of things. So there is a disconnection between this reality and materiality. And the extreme examples of it are virtual reality, whereas reality is fully virtual based on digitalization, digital object, or augmented reality in which you enhance the information related to reality. And okay, this was a very general framework to understand the process of digitalization. What I would like to do now is, to a certain extent, see how we can turn these general issues into analysis of digitalization in rural areas. You have already given a lot of very interesting insights and examples, and my task here is just to try to systematize a little bit what you already have seen with your readings. On this regard, I have to introduce you the DESIRA project. The DESIRA project is an Horizon 2020 project that aims at analyzing digitalization in rural areas and especially at assessing its social economic impact. And the framework we use in the DESIRA is this one you can see reproduced in this picture. So we have digital technologies. Digital technologies are used into application scenarios that are related to three areas: forestry, agriculture, and rural areas, but specific domains within these areas. And these technologies used in application scenario produce a socio-economic impact. So what are the application scenarios? We have to analyze them in their physical part, in their informational part and in the social part. So we start from the approaches of socio-technical systems. It's a body of literature that says, look, there is no technologies, let's say, without the integration with society. In order to understand technology, you have to understand what is using technology, who is designing technology, and how technology interacts with society. So in order to do this, you can analyze socio-technical systems into three components: actors, rules, and artifacts. And the example I make, very simple, it has not much to do with digital, is that even if you consider a hammer, a wall, and a nail. So, for example, you want to hang pictures to an empty wall. You need some instruments, so the hammer, the nails, and the pictures. But at the same time, you have to consider the context, the social context in which this operation occurs. So, for example, you can consider a family composed by father, mother, son, and daughter. So the question here is, who does the work? So, for example, who takes the hammer, who takes the nail, and then let's say, implant the nail into the wall? Normally, according to culture, this may be the man, because traditionally these are, let's say, men's work. I know that this doesn't apply now everywhere, but this may be one of the rules that you may consider in different cultures. But at the same time, you have to consider who gives the advice, what kind of level of force you have to apply, what is the pace of hammering, or what is the distance between nails. So each of these aspects are regulated by rules. And who is going to set these rules? It depends on the people in the family. For example, it would be possible that the mother tells to the husband where to plant the nails, what distances between different nails, and how to let's say, link together different type of pictures. And for example, the youngest son could help the fathers in giving in nails and then learning, for example, how to do it. So this is a simple social technical system, but behind the simple operation of nailing, of hammering a nail, there is a very relevant and sometimes very important set of rules and set of actors. So let's get back to the system we saw before. We can consider this as a technical system, because you can see the machine that pumps the milk from the cow to the tank. You can consider the control system that starts and stops the milking machines. And you can consider just the farmer as a person that activates this system or not. So you can consider it a technical system. But if you start considering the person who is in the system, you can try to ask who is this person, who is connected with, why is she doing this work? How can she change these tasks? Is she happy? Is not happy? What is she expecting from this work, etc.? And this will change the way you will see the system. So for this reason, this is a cyber physical system, because parts of the system are digital and part of the system are physical. The cow is physical, the technology, part of the technology is physical, but part of the technology is digital, because the start-stop command is given by digital issue, and data milking flow are digital. Now we can see the bigger picture, as I said before. So when you consider an artifact as a technical system, even a cyber physical system, you can see that there are a lot of other aspects that are linked together. First of all, the fact that you link together the production of artifacts with distribution of artifacts and the use of artifacts. And each of these aspects that you can see in bold are linked to other aspects that belong to the realm of society. So they are rules, they are actors that they influence the way artifacts are produced, artifacts are distributed, artifacts are used. And understanding this make you understand, first of all, how could be possibly done differently. Because if you start considering users, maybe you will design the product differently. But at the same time, you can start understanding what is the impact of digitalization on the system. Because, for example, if you consider automation, you can consider all the direct and indirect effects on the system. So this is a system we are analyzing with DESIRA. And this system, we call it socio-cyber physical system. So it is composed by actors, artifacts, and rules. But these actors, artifacts, and rules are part in the digital sphere and part in the physical sphere and part in the social sphere. So here the system is related to the maintenance of the territory. For example, you have a river. This river flows regularly, but when there are too heavy rains, for example, it gets overflow. And when it produces floods, for example, the road are collapse because the water, the impact of water damages the road, so it creates interruptions. And in this case, citizens passing by have the car and see that something is damaged, and so the citizen signals to the officer this damage to the road. The office have to evaluate the damage together with the manager. The manager takes the decision, and then the officer gives the authorization of enterprise that maintenance of the road. But also you can have the farmer. Also the farmer, for example, can be closer to the river, so he or she can detect the possibility of flood before it happens. So if the system of maintenance, the institution that maintains the area, can pay the farmer for giving information about the situation of the river, it will have a kind of reduction of costs. And for example, the farmer could be also some restoring of the river, because he has the machines, so it can do the works, some works to the system. So this is a socio-technical system. When you introduce, for example, drones, what you can do, for example, you can fly the drone over the river, monitor the situation, send data immediately to the officer, and then the officer can start the procedure of authorization. So in this case, the drone adds a tool for data collection and early signaling, and that can improve the situation of the river. So the analysis of the impact of this drone, in this case, have to consider what happens to the farmer, if, for example, the farmer can be involved into the analysis of the drone, or if it will be excluded from this system, because now the drones gets a better, let's say, signaling of the situation of the river. At the same time, you may have a situation where the farmer, excluded by the use of the drone, has not means of, let's say, subsistence, and then abandons the land. But if the farmers abandons the land is degraded. So this will create other pressures on the environment, and so on and so forth. So when you start considering these socio-technical systems, you can start to look at what happens at any level of these systems, understanding what can be digitalized, what are the possible impacts of this digitalization, and maybe starting to see alternative solutions. Maybe, for example, the ones that combine the role of drones with the role of farmers. Why not? This is just a matter of design. So what are the implications in terms of analysis? We use this framework in DESIRA to try to understand who are the users, who are the designers, who are the beneficiaries, who are the victims, and who are the regulators, and who can influence, because all of these things have an impact, and they may change the impact of a technology. In agriculture, as you know, we have several tools now that are being considered. We have satellites, sensors, drones, unmanned vehicles, robots, Internet of Things that helps to automation, social networks, communication, virtual and augmented reality. All these aspects are being introduced into agriculture, and for each of them, it is possible to try to understand what will be the impact at different levels. In this case, for example, these machines helps to assess better what the machine should do. So this is an instrument that helps the farmers to improve the efficiency of their operations, so save energy, save fertilizers, etc. But of course, it has a cost, and only bigger farms can afford the cost of it. So what happens to small farmers? Or this is, for example, a system to, it is called virtual fencing. So you put sensors and collars in the neck of the cows, and you leave them free. And what happens if they try to trespass a given boundary? They get an electric shock that tell them that they shouldn't trespass these boundaries. This is considered virtual fencing, so you save a lot of money in fences. Actually, I think this works especially in Australia, where there are big areas. It is less working in Italy, for example. But this is something that already happens, and somebody are starting to consider, for example, the issue of the animal welfare. So being surveilled like this is for animal good or not? So this is quite interesting question, I think, among others. Or, for example, this augmented reality can help the farmer to detect visually the situation of his or her field. So you can have the productivity, the pH, the moisture, etc., the temperature, and this can help you in decision making related to farming operation. This system is based on a system of sensors connected together, connected to the smartphone of the farmer, that in the end, in the smartphone, have simple information of what to do. So what can be the purposes of digital innovation? We can make a grid to analyze the different purposes. For example, most of the digital purposes are now productivity. You increase your revenues or reduce your costs. Or, for example, you can speed up administration, digitalizing a lot of things. And this is a way that is very promising, because you know that farmers, and not only farmers, hate paperwork. Or, for example, you can improve coordination, because as information flows much more easily, you can easily coordinate with other actors across the value chain. Or you can improve the quality of the product, having information about the link between fertilizers, water, let's say agricultural practices on quality. You can improve your quality, but you can also improve the resource of the efficiency, the quality of the environment, health, visibility of reputation. If you have information, you can communicate this information, if this information can give you visibility in the market. And of course, you can use it for business intelligence. I was told recently that Chinese people look at the satellites data in Italy to see if they can be competitive with them, because they can, let's say, determine the yields, for example, of rice. So they can see what happens at Italian level and can make decisions in relation to the production of rice in China. And this is a list of tasks that are being carried out at rural level. If we think to rural life, if we skip a little bit from agriculture and we consider rural life, we could see that there are a lot of aspects, and we can analyze the effects of digitalization on each of them. For example, on shopping, is the rural condition being improved or worsened by e-shopping? It is possible that digitalization in this case may revert a trend to shrinking of the economy, because there are no services. But if I have the possibility to buy something online and get delivered by a truck, maybe my location in a rural area could be more favorable because I don't see the difficulty of searching goods for using. But for example, traveling for leisure, traveling for business, what is the implication for rural dwellers? Doing administrative practices. Sometimes rural life is difficult because you have to get your car and go into the capital to do a lot of bureaucratic things. But if you have e-government, you can be decentralized, so you can do it staying at home. Entertaining, health, social interaction, education, eating, parenting, even parenting can be digitalized. Working, participations, for example, getting informed, decision-making, co-production, etc. So there are a lot of areas where if you start planning digitalization, and actually, as you know, in Europe, we are talking a lot about digitalization of rural areas, and this may change the way rural life is perceived. But of course, you have to plan it, to create a strategy, because you can't have everything. So when you make a strategy of digitalization, you have to think to what are the weaknesses of the rural areas, what are the strengths, what are the opportunities, and then understanding what is the role of digital tools. What is done in most of the cases is the other way around. They say, okay, we want to digitalize, and then everything is digital is good, and everything is analogic is bad. But this is not a way to assess digitalization. We have seen that if we consider socio-technical networks, digitalization can be bad or good according to the actors, according to the rules, according to the types of artifacts. So if you start from let's say, a specific objective, you can try to adapt technologies to the objective and not vice versa. So you don't automatize for the sake of automatization. Automatization can be good in given situation, but it can be bad in other situation. What is important is to understand what is the purpose of digitalization. And for example, this is related to business. So with digitalization, you can change work organization, you can change business relations, you can change primary functions like logistics, operations, selling, communicating, etc. And again, this is something that affects small and big, and depends on the type of technologies that can affect them, that you, let's say, foresee a development for a rural area. And another field, very important field of digitalization is public administration. So when public administration go digital, it has to consider how to reorganize the work, how to reorganize the service provision, for example, health, security, education, civic protection, etc. And also how to enforce the law, for example, with monitoring, control, types of sanctions, etc. So how to assess the socioeconomic impact of digitalization? I'm going very fast because we are near to the end. We have to prevent innovation threats, first of all. So innovation can be good, but also can be bad. So you have to anticipate failures, you have to consider societal concern, you have to identify necessary adaptations of the environment. All these concerns are grouped into what we call the responsible research and innovation approach. The responsible research and innovation tries to consider technology not as a good per se, but in relation to the impact that it can create. And having a responsible approach means that researchers should have a look at these things. So I have already explained what is the DESIRA project. We have several living labs that are developing discussion on these issues in different countries, as you can see, and we have some analytical questions, for example, related to, starting from the users. How many digital devices does the farmer own? What are the most used apps? What are the activities for which digital technologies are used most? What are the most relevant present benefits of digital technologies, potential benefits, conditions that limits the uptake of these technologies? These are questions that in the field research you can try to develop in order to see what, to what extent the technologies may be beneficial. And as the last aspect I would like to tell you is the framework for the analysis of the impact. We have three different types of impact. One is design-related conditions. So you can already avoid problems by designing a technology. For example, racial bias is one of the most known issues in artificial intelligence, but we know that there are issues that can be fixed, and so this bias can be replaced. It's not inherent in the technology to be biased racially. It is something related to culture, so you have to avoid this. Or we have the access-related conditions. We talk a lot about digital device and digital divide, and this is digital divide. We know it's physical access to the internet, but also education, skills, etc. But we also have a system conditions. So I go straight to the system conditions because they may be a little bit new for you. And they could be, for example, these ones, congestion. You have the network, but if there are too many people having access to the network, you have a congestion. So nobody can use the network because the network is not able to bear the number. Or information overload. You have too much information, you don't know to whom you trust. Or even the fake news, the possibility to create news that are not true, and then they alter the, let's say, the relation between people. Panic diffusion, if you have information that spreads very fast, unfiltered, it may create panic, and in some cases also rage, anger, etc. So we have to be very careful on that. Of course, we have cyber attacks, and we can go also to exploitation. Exploitation based on the different understanding of the mechanisms of the network, and also discrimination. One example, I don't know if you have seen Black Mirror, and I think that it's a very interesting example of system impact. So the rating system in this movie, there is a story by which everybody are evaluated by a rating system, as it happens in Uber, TripAdvisors, etc. But this can have lot of implication, lot of inequalities, lot of discrimination. And this movie is very interesting on this regard because, let's say, it depicts a society where the evaluation system is creating a very nasty situations. We need ethics, because, as you know, ethics is something related to rules of what is good and what is bad. And if you know that your choice will have effects on reality, to a certain extent, information will imply responsibility. And responsibility is related to rules of behavior, so you can be judged. So anticipation of consequences can make innovators take into account risk when designing innovation, foster adjustment on innovation pathways, give inputs for generation of meta technologies, give inputs to the adaptation of the environment. I think I can skip this, and I would like to thank you for also resisting to in this very hot afternoon. But if you have any question also after this lecture, so with email, etc., I'm here and available. Thank you.